I ignored the jokes, the blame, the stolen credit. But when a jealous coworker tried to destroy my career, I made one choice that flipped the entire office upside down. They were never really my friends. I just did not know it yet. Back then, I used to think of the office as a team. Not in the cheesy poster-on-the-wall kind of way, but like a real crew. People who had each other's backs, who shared inside jokes by the coffee machine, and went out for drinks after a rough week. We laughed. We vented. We stayed late finishing projects and ordered greasy food that tasted better than it should have at midnight. And for a while, that illusion was enough. The first real job I landed after college was at a mid-sized marketing firm in Indianapolis. I was 25, fresh-faced, hungry to prove myself. The office was cramped but lively, the kind of place where birthdays meant homemade cupcakes and someone's dog was always wandering around with a bandana tied around its neck. It felt warm, human. People called me Mitch, even though my full name is Mitchell. They said it like we had all been friends since high school. I remember thinking, this is how it is supposed to be. After growing up in a home where silence was more common than support, being part of a group, any group, felt like oxygen. I was not the smartest guy in the room. Definitely not the loudest. But I worked hard, stayed late, showed up early. I would hand off credit when the team succeeded and bite my tongue when things went sideways. I believed, honestly, that keeping your head down and being a good teammate would pay off. And at first, it kind of did. Promotions were slow, but I was moving. People smiled when they saw me. They asked about my weekend. I was on group texts that buzzed with dumb memes and inside jokes. We would hit the bar down the block after client presentations, order wings and cheap beer, and rant about clients like we were all in the same foxhole. But underneath it all, something subtle was shifting. At the time, I told myself it was nothing. Just harmless teasing, right? You sure you want to lead that pitch, Mitch? Someone would ask, with a smirk that lingered a second too long. Man, you are just too nice sometimes, someone else would add, shaking their head like it was a compliment. They would laugh, and so would I. Because that is what you do when you think you are part of something. You laugh it off. You let it slide. You convince yourself it is not worth rocking the boat over a few jokes. But I did not know then that those jokes were just the first cracks in the surface. And the thing about cracks? They always spread. It always starts small. Someone forgets to copy you on an email. A meeting gets moved without notice. A project suddenly becomes a group effort, after you already did the heavy lifting. At first, I chalked it all up to miscommunication. We were a busy office. Deadlines were tight. Mistakes happened. No one was out to get anyone, right? But the little things started stacking up. I would suggest an idea in a meeting and get blank stares. 2 days later, that same idea would show up again, this time out of someone else's mouth. And suddenly, it was brilliant. One time, I spent an entire weekend building out a pitch deck. Monday morning, my name was gone from the front page. Replaced. No explanation. No apology. And still, I said nothing. I just kept telling myself, it is not a big deal. I thought maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe being the guy who did not stir the pot would help me in the long run. But the jokes started landing differently. People called me Mild Mitch. Said it like it was a personality trait. If something went wrong, I was the first to get that look, the one that says, he probably forgot something. I would triple-check my work, obsess over every slide, every line of code, every email, and still, I could feel the doubt hanging over me like fog. They joked that I worried too much, that I needed to chill. But what they never said out loud, what I think some of them believed, was that I was easy to blame because I never pushed back. And they were not wrong. One day, I found out a report I had spent 3 days on had been passed up to management, with my name nowhere in sight. I only found out because the printer jammed, and the original copy fell out onto the floor with my notes still scribbled in the margins. That was when I started to feel it. That low, slow burn in my chest. Jealousy? Maybe. But it was deeper than that. It was betrayal. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind you feel when people smile to your face, but eat off your plate behind your back. And I was still trying to be the good guy. Still making excuses. Still pretending we were a team. I did not know then that one of them, someone I thought I could trust, was already setting the trap that would make all those small things feel like child's play. I started keeping a private folder on my desktop. Just a simple collection, dates, emails, screenshots. At first, I told myself it was just for clarity. just in case something came up during performance reviews. But deep down, I knew what I was doing. I was building a safety net, quiet proof that I was not crazy. Because by then, things had shifted from annoying to intentional. It was subtle, but sharp, like death by paper cuts. People were starting to act like I was a problem to work around, like I was the guy who could not quite keep up. One morning, a junior analyst named Brooke accidentally deleted one of my shared files off the drive. No backup, just gone. When I asked her about it, she smiled and said, "You probably should not leave important stuff out in the open like that." She said it like a joke, but her eyes stayed flat. Then there was Tyler, one of those guys who looked good in meetings, said all the right buzzwords, and had a talent for being just close enough to the boss to never get questioned. We used to be cool. Not close, but decent. Played darts at the bar. Swapped fantasy football picks. But somewhere along the way, he started finding ways to work around me, sending updates directly to the VP instead of looping me in, claiming confusion when tasks got reassigned. I would find out about meetings after they happened. I would walk past the glass conference room and see my team inside, faces I worked with every day, and feel like an outsider in my own job. Once, I caught Tyler in the break room telling one of the new hires that I meant well, but had a tendency to overcomplicate things. Said it in that low, confiding tone people use when they want to sound helpful while planting seeds. That one stuck with me. And the worst part? My manager, Claire, just kept brushing it off. Every time I brought something up, she acted like I was being sensitive. "Just focus on your work, Mitch," she told me. "You're doing fine." But I was not fine. I was grinding harder than ever, sleeping like garbage, checking emails at midnight, watching people around me get praised for work I had contributed to, sometimes built from scratch. I would sit in meetings and hear my own phrasing, my own structure, coming out of someone else's mouth. And every time I tried to speak up, I could see the shift in the room. Like they were thinking, "Here he goes again." The final straw in that chapter came when a report I had finalized was mysteriously corrupted the day it was due. Tyler offered to redo it at the last minute and ended up getting praised for saving the day. When I checked the metadata later, I saw he had accessed my draft hours before the file went bad. I stared at the screen for a long time that night, just staring. I knew it then, clear as daylight. They were not just stepping on me to climb higher. They were building ladders out of my work. And I had no idea how far they were willing to go next. There is a kind of quiet that hits you when you know you are being watched, but no one will admit it. It started on a Wednesday morning. I walked in early, same as always, grabbed my usual desk, second row, next to the window, and something felt off. My chair had been moved, just slightly. Papers on my desk had shifted. My pen cup was on the wrong side. Not messy, just wrong. Call it paranoia. But when you are in a place where you no longer feel safe, the smallest things turn into alarms. I told myself to shake it off. Maybe the cleaning crew knocked something over. Maybe I had left it like that. Maybe I was just tired. But then it happened again the next day. This time, an email draft I had been working on, one I had saved but never sent, was mysteriously gone. I never delete drafts. Ever. And it was not in the trash either. Just gone. I checked the activity log. Someone had accessed my machine after hours. IT confirmed it came from my own login. That was impossible. I started locking my desktop with a password after that. Updated everything. Even brought in my own wireless keyboard with a lock switch. But the damage had already started. The next week, during a monthly metrics meeting, Claire, the manager, pulled up one of our dashboards and said something I will never forget. She said, "Mitch, your numbers from last month were well below target. We will need to talk after this." My stomach dropped, because I knew that was wrong. I had been ahead, way ahead. I waited until the meeting ended and went straight to my archive. Opened the files I had stored on my external drive. Pulled up the original spreadsheet. Everything checked out. But when I compared it to the version submitted to Claire, it had been changed. The formulas were broken. The results skewed. It looked like I had padded the numbers to make myself look good, but failed at even doing that correctly. Someone had framed me. And I knew exactly who it was. Tyler. He had been the one pushing me to share access to files on the new drive system. Said it was more collaborative. Said it would make us look better as a team. I had agreed, just trying to be helpful. Like an idiot. I went to Claire's office with both files in hand. Tried to explain the situation. Showed her the timestamps, the versions, the original metrics. She barely glanced at it. "Mitch," she said. You are too smart to be making excuses. That was it. No investigation. No warning. Just a note in my file and a follow-up scheduled with HR to align on expectations. I walked out of that meeting and sat at my desk staring blankly at my monitor. That was the moment I realized this was not just about office politics or bruised egos anymore. This was war, and someone had just fired the first real shot. But what Tyler did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had already started recording everything. And that week, someone else made a mistake. A mistake big enough to change everything. It was the intern who tipped me off. Her name was Dana. Quiet, sharp, always buried in reports. She was one of those people you barely noticed at first, until you realized she saw everything. We had barely spoken outside of project updates. But that Friday, right before lunch, she stopped by my desk, looked over her shoulder, and whispered, "Can you meet me in the loading bay after 5?" I thought she was joking at first. I even gave a half laugh, waiting for a punchline. She just said, "I saw something you need to know, and I do not trust anyone else." At 5:15, I met her downstairs near the loading dock, right by the back elevator, where nobody ever went unless they were sneaking out early or dragging boxes. She handed me a flash drive and said, "You did not get this from me." Then she walked off like nothing happened. I sat in my car with the engine running, just staring at it. That night, I plugged it into my old laptop. Not the work one. The personal one I never connected to company Wi-Fi. The one with no cloud backups, no syncing apps, no tracking. And what I saw made my chest go tight. It was a screen recording, captured from inside the shared dashboard system, dated 2 weeks earlier. There was Tyler, clear as day, logged into the admin panel. He was inside my project folder. You could see his mouse copying files, opening spreadsheets, changing formulas, saving new versions under my name. He moved fast, like someone who had done it before. The recording was time-stamped, watermarked, and paired with metadata logs showing his access trail. Dana had been reviewing logs for a data science rotation when she stumbled across the pattern. Dozens of unusual logins, all tracing back to Tyler's profile. Half of them during times he claimed to be off-site or in meetings. And I realized, this was not the first time he had done this. I was just the one dumb enough not to protect my work from him. I sat there in the dark with the screen glowing back at me. My jaw clenched, my pulse racing. I finally had proof. Not speculation. Not vibes. Not assumptions. Proof. But I knew if I walked into Claire's office with that flash drive, it would mysteriously disappear. If I tried to bring it to HR, it would require investigation that would take 6 months and quietly go nowhere. I needed leverage. I needed witnesses. I needed a plan. So I made a list. Names. Incidents. Timestamps. I cross-referenced every deleted file. Every time my name was left off a deliverable. Every sudden drop in performance metrics. And with Dana's help, I started connecting dots I had missed before. That weekend, I pulled a 48-hour sprint, printing records, building timelines, and assembling everything into one airtight document. It was not just Tyler. There were others. And what they had done would not just cost me my job. It could have destroyed my entire career. Monday felt off the second I walked in. The office was too quiet. Not in a peaceful way, in a waiting way. The kind of silence that says someone already knows something you do not. Tyler was already at his desk. He looked up when I passed, gave me this short nod, and that smirk he always saved for moments when he thought he was 2 steps ahead. I sat down, logged into my machine, and just stared at the screen. Then the calendar alert popped up. Performance review, 9 a.m., Claire's office. I had not requested it. I had not even seen it until now. My chest tightened. 2 minutes later, Claire stepped out of her glass-walled office and called my name loud enough for the whole row to hear. Heads turned. Eyes lingered. Everyone pretended they were still working. I stood, walked the long stretch across the floor like a man headed to the gallows. Inside, the blinds were drawn. The mood was different. HR was already seated. Janet, the same woman who once gave me a mug for my birthday that said team player. Now she looked like someone ready to read a last rite. Claire motioned for me to sit, and then she slid a folder across the desk. Inside, a printed thread of anonymous complaints. Accusations. Altering project data. Undermining coworkers. Inappropriate conduct toward team members. Failure to report errors. Every single bullet point was a lie, but each one was buried in just enough vagueness to look real. Multiple team members have expressed concerns, Claire said, her voice flat, eyes unreadable. This is serious, Mitch. I looked at Janet, but she was already checking a box on some pre-printed form. Like this had been decided before I even sat down. This is a formal review, she added. Depending on how this goes, it may escalate further. It hit me all at once. This was the moment they had been building toward. The jabs, the misfiles, the fake mistakes. It was not random. It was a campaign. And now they were putting the noose around my name, hoping I would panic. I took a slow breath. Then I pulled something from my own bag. My binder. Not a folder. Not a flash drive. A full, color-coded binder. With tabs, charts, dates, metadata, timestamps, everything. I set it gently on the table. Then another item. A signed statement from Dana, time-stamped and notarized over the weekend. No emotion. Just facts. Claire blinked. I flipped to the first page and slid it over. I am happy to go over this with you, I said calmly. But I would also prefer we include legal on the call. Janet froze mid-checkmark. Claire reached for the binder slowly, flipping the first few pages. Her eyes stopped moving after the fifth. Because sitting right there was proof that Tyler had not only tampered with reports, he had used admin-level access under her credentials to do it. That is right. He had used Claire's login twice. And the system recorded everything. Claire leaned back slowly, hands flat on the desk. Mitch, why didn't you come to us sooner? I let the question hang in the air. Because what I wanted to say was, you never would have believed me. But I just said, I was collecting evidence. By Tuesday morning, the walls were closing in. I could feel it, like the tension in the air before a storm breaks. After the meeting with HR, everything moved fast. Too fast. Claire stopped replying to group threads. Janet began quietly asking questions in one-on-one chats. A team-wide IT audit got announced out of nowhere. And Tyler? Tyler went quiet. No smug grins. No snide remarks. He stopped even making eye contact with me, which, after months of passive dominance, was all the confirmation I needed. He knew. He knew I had him. That morning, I walked into the office and found people whispering around the break room. One guy even nodded at me like I had just returned from battle. Nobody said it out loud, but something had shifted. The fear Tyler used to walk around with like armor? It was gone. I sat down at my desk and booted up my machine. The binder was already in HR's hands. Claire had requested an emergency meeting with the executive team. I had been told to stand by and remain available, which meant they were scrambling. But the thing is, people like Tyler do not just disappear quietly. They do not apologize. They do not admit defeat. They strike. And that afternoon, he did just that. At 4:13 p.m., an anonymous email hit the company-wide inbox. Subject line, a pattern of misconduct, what Mitch has been hiding. Inside was a PDF file, 6 pages long. It was a hit job. Cherry-picked screenshots, misrepresented Slack messages, a calendar invite that made it look like I had skipped out on mandatory diversity training. He even included a photo, cropped and zoomed in, from a happy hour 3 years ago, trying to frame it like I had been drunk on the clock. And for a few terrifying minutes, it worked. People looked at me differently. I could feel the doubt crawl back into the room like smoke under a door. Even Janet sent a follow-up email. Please be available for additional questions. I felt the heat return. That old burn in the back of my neck. The whispering. But this time, I was not unarmed. I had my full log, every version, every Slack thread, every message in context. I had timestamps showing where I was, who I was with, and when the crop photo had been posted. More importantly, I had video. Turns out, Dana was not the only one who had seen what Tyler was doing. A second intern had been compiling a culture case study for his final project. His camera, mounted in the open lounge, had caught something Tyler never expected. 2 weeks ago, Tyler had been bragging to a coworker during lunch, talking about how easy it was to get into Mitch's files and how some people are just too dumb to lock their stuff down. All on camera, all recorded. And yes, clear audio. That night, I burned it all to a new drive, labeled it with the date, sent copies to HR, legal, and Claire directly. No commentary, no panic, no drama, just a subject line that said, context matters. By the next morning, the office was buzzing. Tyler's desk? Empty. His name? Scrubbed from Slack. No goodbye, no farewell email. Just gone. But even with him out of the picture, the damage was not done yet. Because what nobody realized, not even me at the time, was that Tyler had not acted alone. Tyler being fired should have felt like a victory, but instead, it felt unfinished. Like a bad movie where the villain disappears too early, and you are left waiting for the second act to drop the real horror. I kept coming back to one question. How did he get access to Claire's credentials? It did not make sense. Tyler was a manipulator, not a hacker. He knew how to push people, not crack systems. And Claire was no fool. Her login had two-factor authentication tied to a personal device. So either Tyler got really lucky, or someone handed it to him. That answer came 3 days later, in the form of a casual coffee with someone I used to consider a friend. Jason. Jason and I had started at the company within the same month. Back when we were just two clueless guys in cheap dress shirts who bonded over late nights and vending machine dinners. We had worked side by side on a dozen campaigns. He was the first person to ever call me brother in the office. I had been to his wedding. So when he stopped by my desk that Friday and asked if I wanted to grab a coffee and clear the air, I figured he meant about Tyler. Maybe he wanted to vent. Maybe he wanted to say thanks. We walked to the little place across the street, the one with the burnt espresso and the sticky tabletops. We sat in our usual booth. And then he said it. I did not know Tyler was going to go that far, Jason muttered, looking down at his cup. It was supposed to be temporary. Just shift things around. Make you look less reliable. I blinked. I did not respond. Not right away. I just stared at him. He kept going. Claire was under pressure. You were on track to outpace half the team. People were nervous. Tyler said if we could just slow you down a little, things would even out. We. Not he. We. Jason looked up finally. His face was not full of guilt. It was full of rationalization. Like he had rehearsed this in the mirror. He told us he would take the heat. Said it would never trace back. But once you started collecting receipts, he exhaled. I knew it was just a matter of time. My hands clenched under the table. Every conversation I had ever had with him started playing in reverse in my head. All those times I shared doubts, frustrations, things I thought were safe. He had been using it all. Who else? I asked. Jason shook his head. Does not matter. Everyone's running scared now. I stared at the coffee. Cold and bitter. Jason leaned forward and said something I will never forget. You were not supposed to fight back, Mitch. You were supposed to take the hit and fade out. That was how this usually works. There it was. The truth behind every fake smile, every inside joke, every time they said I was too nice. They had mistaken kindness for weakness. But this time, they picked the wrong guy. I stood up, left the coffee behind, did not say another word, because I had one last thing to do. And this time, it was my move. The email went out at 9 a.m. sharp. Subject line, clarifying recent events, from Mitch Caldwell. I sent it to the full team. Not just marketing. Not just leadership. Everyone. I had sat on it for 2 nights, rewriting it over and over until it cut sharp but clean. No slander, no rage. Just facts. I laid it all out. The tampered metrics, the unauthorized access, the orchestrated blame campaign, and the names involved, including Jason. I attached the evidence. I included the timestamps. I linked to the internal audit logs that backed it all up. I even included Dana's note of corroboration and the internal policy codes that had been violated. It was professional, surgical, and devastating. Then I walked into the morning stand-up meeting like it was any other day. People were silent. Jason was not there. Claire was not either. But Janet from HR was. And so was a partner I had never seen step foot on our floor before, CFO level, blazer pressed, tie perfect, face unreadable. He walked right into the room and said, "This meeting is now closed. Please check your inboxes." Everyone scattered. No one made eye contact. A few people gave me nods, not smiles, just acknowledgments. Like soldiers passing another survivor on the field. I went back to my desk and waited. By noon, 3 more desks were empty. Jason, Brooke, one other manager from strategy, someone who had been feeding reports to Claire behind the scenes. By 2 o'clock, an all-staff memo went out. It used corporate language, realignment, internal review, reinforcement of ethical values. But the message was clear. The house had been scrubbed. And me? I got called back into Claire's office one last time. She looked tired. Not angry. Not defeated. Just tired. She said, "You know, Mitch, this will follow you. People talk. People remember when someone rocks the boat. I nodded slowly. Let them talk. I stood up, turned to leave. She added one last thing. You could have just moved on. Found another job. Let it go. I looked back at her, steady, calm. If I had let it go, I said, you would have done it to the next guy, and the next. I was not the first, but I had to be the last. Then I walked out of her office, out of the mess, out of the shell of who I used to be. But I was not walking away from the company, because that very evening, I got a call from upper leadership. They were impressed, not just by the evidence, but by how I handled it. Quietly, methodically, professionally. They asked me if I would consider stepping up, interim manager for the team, rebuilding what had been torn down. I paused, and I said yes, not because I needed revenge, but because I wanted to do the job right. For once, you know that moment when everything goes quiet, not because there is nothing left to say, but because everything that needed to be said finally was? That was me, standing in front of a different team now. A smaller one, cleaner, honest. It had been 3 weeks since Tyler vanished, and the rest fell behind him. 3 weeks of rebuilding, rehiring, late nights untangling a mess I did not make, but had inherited anyway. Some of the new folks looked at me like I had been through a war. Others did not know the full story, and I did not rush to tell it, because that was not the point anymore. I had spent years thinking silence was safer, that if I kept my head down, worked hard, and stayed out of the drama, people would eventually see me for who I really was. Turns out, people like Tyler never see you. Not unless you were standing in their way. And people like Jason, they only smile when they are winning. I used to call them teammates. Some, even friends. Now I call them what they really were, tests. Every dig, every theft, every lie dressed up as a joke. They were just pages in a longer story I had not finished reading yet. But here is the thing nobody tells you. When you finally speak up, when you draw that line in the sand, when you risk everything to tell the truth, you do not just expose them. You expose yourself too. I learned I was not weak. I was just tired of being underestimated. I learned that being the nice guy is not a flaw unless you let people use it as a leash. And I learned that sometimes you have to be the storm, because waiting for justice to show up is how people like Tyler keep winning. People still talk about what happened. They call it the Tyler incident, like he was the whole problem. But I know better. It was never just about one guy. It was about a system that rewarded snakes and punished silence. And the only way to end the game is to flip the board over and show them what the truth really looks like. So here I am, still showing up, still doing the work. Only now, they know better than to mistake me for the quiet one.